The time is now turning to 5:53 on this Friday morning, and here's what you need to know before you go.
The cockpit voice recorder from the medical transport jet that crashed in a Philadelphia neighborhood did not record the deadly crash. That's according to a preliminary report from the National Transportation Safety Board. The NTSB said Thursday the device did not record any of the accident flight and had likely not been recording audio for several years. The plane also had an onboard enhanced ground proximity warning system, and that's been shipped to the manufacturer's facility to determine whether any flight data can be recovered, but the process is still ongoing. 7 people died after the plane fell from the sky shortly after takeoff on January 31st. The NTSB said there were no distress calls received from the 2 pilots who were communicating with air traffic control at the time of the accident.
The man charged in connection to horse neglect in Bayfield County made a brief appearance in court yesterday. In total, 72-year-old Kim Kingsley faces 58 charges, 4 of which are felonies. Some of the charges allege he didn't provide his horses with proper shelter, food, and water. 16 of them were seized from his property last year. While yesterday's hearing appeared uneventful, Kingsley still has to abide by the conditions set in an early hearing. That includes providing proper food and water for his remaining animals, allowing animal welfare checks, and not buying any more animals. The order says that the seized horses will remain in Bayfield County's custody and that Kingsley's not allowed to contact the person caring for them. He could face $10,000 in bonds, and if he fails to meet this condition.
The public is invited to a meeting about 2 intersections near Duluth Elementary School. Engineers with St. Louis County Public Works are conducting studies for 2 intersections near Lowell Elementary School. They'll look at Rice Lake Road at Barnes Road and West Arrowhead Road at Madison Avenue. The intersections are being studied as a pair because changes made to one could impact access and safety at the other. This study comes after several crashes on Rice Lake Road outside Lowell Elementary. The district decided to test out a pilot program for student pickup and drop-off, but there are still some traffic backups. As part of the study, they want input from neighbors and anyone who travels this area. The public meeting is Tuesday, March 11th at 6 p.m. at the St. Scholastica Student Center. It will also be live streamed. The outcomes of these studies will support future funding requests to construct safety improvements.
And Minnesota Power is letting customers know that their electricity supply is unchanged. That word after Ontario's premier threatened on Tuesday to cut off energy to Minnesota and 2 other states. His threat was in response to tariffs imposed on Canada by the Trump administration. In a statement, Minnesota Power leaders say they source about 11% of their power supply from Manitoba, not Ontario, adding the majority of their power supply comes from Minnesota Power's other facilities in Minnesota. And the U.S. Wednesday, Lake Country Power told us their wholesale power provider receives only about 2% of its energy from Canada.